Welcome, my friends. Today we're going into user story mapping. It's something you've heard a lot about. And today we have our awesome guru, Roy, who is responsible for me getting wild and hungry about Agile. You got to blame this guy over here. He's the reason why I'm wild about Agile. So, Roy, why is user story mapping so important? And just take it away and roll us through this whole thing.
Absolutely. And if you wouldn't mind enabling sharing, Phil, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So user story mapping is a really good facilitation technique for building backlogs and for imagining your backlog, visualizing your backlog. And so let me do this. Let me share my screen, and we're going to go through a couple of some sample visuals. So today we're going to be using a tool. There are lots of tools out there in the marketplace to help us with this, but I want to give you the opportunity to do some interaction. This tool is called Miro. Not trying to sell it. Lots of tools out there that do the same basic thing. So I'm going to start over here. What is a user story map and why would we do it? All right. So a user story map is a multi-dimensional view of your backlog. If you think about the backlog, the product backlog, as we've described many times, it is a sequential list of work that we want to get done. Now, it should be prioritized by value, but the reality is it's actually a sequence of things that we're going to implement, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, there's value in doing that, of course, but you think about all of the work that we do to visualize what it is we're trying to accomplish. We talk about, the vision statements. We talk about, outcomes and all these really good things to help us imagine what it is that we're doing and to empathize and feel what we're doing. And then we take all this stuff and shove it into this flat backlog. Now, your user story map gives you multiple dimensions, so you can kind of see it in a different perspective. And in this case, it's about the user. Again, going back to principle number 1 in the manifesto, our highest priority is to satisfy the user. So this tells the story of our backlog, right? Our
Welcome to Common Sense Scaling, a webinar where we address scaling in an ethical, honest, and truthful way with our coach, Roy Schilling, who has been coaching a lot of us in the world of Agile. Roy, welcome.
Welcome, Phil. It's good to be here. This is going to be a fun topic, so we're ready to roll when you are.
Let's do it.
All right, let me share the right screen. There we go. Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. There we go. Okay, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because there are so many companies that do things that are wrong, right? They do scaling the wrong way. Just real quick, we just want to do a real quick introduction. So many of you, we've met each other a number of times in the past. My name is Roy Schilling. I'm an Agile coach. And I've been coaching organizations for about 15 years now. Now, what that basically means is that I help them not just at the team level, but I also help technically I'm what's called an enterprise transformation coach. So what that means is I help at the highest levels, help organizations understand what Agile is all about, how to scale, how to transform, and how to bring people along. So it's a really fun job. I love my job, but it can be very difficult, especially when we start talking about scaling. And that is our topic for today. So Phil, did you want to go through your introduction?
Absolutely. So my name is Phil, and I've been working with Roy for 8 of those years you mentioned. Believe it or not, 2014, we started working together. And I realized as we worked together that a lot of the companies that we worked with had either no clue about Agile or they had misnomers about Agile. And that's actually what informed this webinar, because we've got a lot of equity in these companies, sweat equity, Roy, don't we? We've trained them, and we don't want them to go off and do the wrong thing, even though some of them have, you
Yeah.
know. But you always bring them back to shore, and that's what this is all about.
Exactly. And sometimes it's okay to allow an organization to go a little bit off the rails so they learn, no matter how many. It's like raising children, right? You can tell your kids, don't touch the stove. They're going to touch the stove. So sometimes it has to happen.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And those who have questions, we welcome the questions. Please keep the chat busy. Don't be quiet. We want as many questions as possible so that we can be absolutely sure that you've understood this topic.
Exactly. So Phil, would you like to go through the ground rules?
Yes, the ground rules. Please mute individually. You could become a co-presenter if Roy and I are kicked off. Hopefully that won't happen. It hasn't happened where we are both kicked off by Zoom, but we'll answer questions at the most opportune time. And we'll take a short break at the top of the first hour, and we'll probably put everyone in classroom mode, but just be on the lookout. If any of us goes off, just be ready to become the co-host. That's it, Roy.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I always like to start this way. Why is this topic important, right? So let's talk about it. A lot of organizations are trying to use Agile. And I say trying to, right? Some of them are doing it well, not many of them, quite honestly, but there are a lot of organizations that are doing Agile. You know, PMI, great statistic. I like this stat. They're saying about 71% of organizations that were great stuff. But let's face the facts that Agile was really designed more for value delivery, speed of value delivery, and to improve the team skills. When it first started out, and actually for a number of years, it wasn't very good at scaling. So if you had larger organizations and larger programs, more teams, this kind of stuff, with more capacity needs, Agile just didn't really fit it. It just didn't work well. It was designed for single team or very small groups of teams. And that's great if you're a small product company. But when you start getting into a large organization, like let's say that you're an international bank and you've got, 40,000 people or something like that, and Agile, it causes some challenges, right? Because it didn't really have a lot of scaling capabilities built into it. Well, over the past 10 years or so, somewhere around there, it's increased. New frameworks have come out. There's been a lot more discussion since Agile became more mainstream. Now the discussion has turned to more about, all right, well, how do we scale this thing up? How do we make this bigger for these larger organizations? Now, what we're really designed for is to reduce structure, increase speed, increase value, small teams, and all that stuff sounds great, but you can think about it. If you've got a need for 100 people to do the work, 5 to 9, that's really small, right? Now, let's talk about this as well. Let's kind of talk about that elephant in the room. Not every organization needs to scale. Just because you've got complex problems, you've got a lot of people, things like that, doesn't mean you necessarily need to employ these sometimes fairly complex scaling frameworks. We'll talk about what those frameworks are in just a little bit. So what we really want to do is we want to analyze, do we need to scale, right? Is it really important? Do we need to scale across the organization? Or are there cases where, this is small enough, we have 1 or 2 teams, do we actually need to employ all of these frameworks? So it's not a one size fits all, right? So one challenge that you might get when you start scaling is it can actually reduce agility. And that's the balance, that's the trade-off that we have. So scaling naturally increases complexity because you've got communication across teams, you have more structure in place, perhaps more governance and policies that need to go in place. And that may significantly reduce our speed and our ability to be agile, right? And Phil, along the way, if you want to add any comments, please feel free to do so.
Absolutely, Roy.
Great, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about what scaling is really all about. So this is where we're talking about larger organizations or larger programs, and we're familiar with programs, more complex spaces, a collection of projects, things like that. Scaling in Agile is a little bit different. Programs are a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a bit. But basically, you've got, more complex environments, more teams that need to be involved. What we want to try to do with this is it's not just about the process. It's not just about the need for more capacity. And I would suggest that more importantly, it's about aligning the delivery to the strategy, making sure that we have a strategy, first off, right? Define what the strategy is, what we're trying to accomplish, and making sure that the work that's being done aligns to that strategy. That's an important aspect of scaling, especially in an agile environment. Now, often scaling, when we're talking about waterfall, It's more about we have a portfolio, which is a collection of programs and projects. We have a program, which is a collection of projects. And then we have the actual work being done. Well, that doesn't necessarily talk a lot about strategy, does it? Right? It's not necessarily guaranteeing that the projects and programs align to that strategy. So maybe there's something missing there. All right, so what we want to do is we want to optimize the flow of value. Notice I didn't say not optimize getting projects done. It's not about completing projects. It's about optimizing the flow of value to our customers. So we need, sometimes higher level planning activities, not just team level activities, to make sure that the teams are delivering on the right stuff and that we're producing that value for our customers. Now, also what we want to do is reduce the bureaucracy on the way. Now, if we're scaling, sometimes that increases bureaucracy. You can see we got some challenges here, some resistance. So the more we reduce bureaucracy safely without causing harm, of course, reducing that bureaucracy can cause us to deliver value faster. And that's really what we're trying to get to. Okay. Now, most Agile frameworks, if you're looking at Scrum and Kanban and XP and a lot of these other frameworks that are out there, they're focused on the team necessarily, because in the past, we really didn't focus a lot on the team. Think about your historic waterfall projects. It was all about, here's the requirements, go get it done, turns it into a feature factory, do it at all costs, meet that delivery date or else. Those kinds of things tended to happen quite often. We weren't really thinking about the team members, the people doing the work. It was more just get your job done, right? Just do your job and drive to a date. Well, now even waterfall organizations, traditional organizations are realizing, oops, maybe we need to spend a little more time focusing on the people that are doing the work so we don't lose them, right? So we get better engagement, so we get better ownership and accountability. We want all that stuff, but forcing someone to a date does not encourage accountability. But paying attention to the human beings, right? Acknowledging them as human beings and recognizing that the people are doing the work, focusing more on human beings, whether you're doing Agile or waterfall, it really doesn't matter. As long as you're focusing on the human beings, you're going to get better performance out of them, right? Now, we do want to make sure that when we start talking about scaling, we're not scaling the team, we're scaling teams. So if you need 100 people to complete the work in a reasonable amount of time, you don't say, okay, well, let's build a 100-person team. That's not really our goal. You keep the team stable, no matter what, small teams, stable teams, keep them together, and we just build additional teams. Now I say just, it's a little more complicated than that, right? And here's the reason. Smaller teams, we remember they're a social structure. It's human beings. Smaller teams work faster. They're more innovative. There's higher levels of trust and collaboration because small groups of people will talk to each other. And think about it this way. Were you ever on a call where you've got 40 people on a call and no one talks, right? No one is saying anything. There's all hands meetings, get all these people on a call and no one's saying anything except one person who's doing the presentation. And maybe you get somebody who's a little bit bold and asks a question or two, right? That's all you get. But if you get a small group of people, 3, 4, 5 people, there's a lot more collaboration, isn't there? They'll talk, they'll be more open. And that's what we want in our teams too. These big, massive, monolithic teams don't work as well. So keep the team small, and we need to increase capacity. You create additional teams, right? That's our goal. More teams are more small teams, not one big team. You just want to add something, Phil?
Absolutely, Roy. So the whole topic about teams on the next slide, we have a slide that I borrowed from Ken Schwaber. And I thought it was a good illustration of when you have a scaling situation, because if you think about scaling, you don't need, in quote, to scale when you've got just 1 to 2 teams and greater than 1 product. It's not a scaling situation. It may be painful, but can it be done? It can. At least you still got 1 or 2 teams working on 1 product or greater than 1 product. But if you go all the way to the bottom right, that's where the scaling situation is. This is where you have more than 2 teams trying to work on 1 product. It's a coordination and the integration. But I like the slide you showed before, Roy, because when we talk about scaling, there's a lot more that we should be thinking about. Not just, oh, let's get this bunch of people and coordinate them. You'll fail. So you need to think about the alignment of delivery to strategy, optimizing the flow of value, and focusing on the team very heavily. I think that's where a lot of folks miss it. They think, oh, it's just a multiplication game, but it's not. It's more than that. But at the heart of scaling, we have 1 product and greater than 2 teams, and that's where it becomes a balancing act of sorts. And becomes rather specific to people who have been there, done that, like you have been there, done that, and you know the right way to do it. There are people trying to do it by just opening a box and saying, well, here's our new framework, just put it in action and it's going to work. It's not about that. And Roy, in your experience of working with teams doing this, what do you have to say about what scaling really is versus what people think it is?
Yeah, so the way that I like to phrase it, scaling is not about a process, not about a framework. It's about getting people to work together, larger groups of people working together. So you imagine the complexity. You've got, say 5 teams, 6 teams all working together on the same set of problems. How do you organize their work so that the people are working on the right teams? How do you get the people to engage with each other across those teams? So we're not creating these little pockets and little silos going on. It's about getting people to work together and coordinate on what work they're doing. It's not about the framework. And Phil, you nailed it with that. People, organizations especially that don't really quite understand organizational design and the social dynamics of putting large. That's really what this is. It's about the human beings. Human beings are the variability, right? That's the variable. If you just have a process and you got a bunch of machines, that's easy. You throw people in there, it becomes a lot more complex, right? So if we have people that don't really understand the social implication, the psychological implication of scaling upward, they tend to just think, like you said, the multiplication game. It's like, well, I've got 5 teams, let's shove them all together. And we put a project manager on top of that. Everything's going to go just fine, right? No, not quite, right?
Not quite.
Yeah.
Not quite. And you break it down on the next slide really well, Roy, where you talk about capacity needs exceeding a single team. It's the beginning of the mindset, but again, it's not the multiplication game. People think, oh, all we need to do is get them to do what they need to do. It's not that easy, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And this first one also, it's a little bit subtle because you know how it is with most organizations. They think, well, I've got all this work to do, so I need more people. Let's throw money at it and let's hire a bunch more people and we'll get it done in our time frame. Well, the first thing we should be thinking about is, do we actually need to get that work done? Right? Is that time box, that milestone that we're trying to set, is it real? Do we really need to do that? Because maybe you'd be better off making it smaller, doing less work and staying within the capacity you have, rather than trying to say, I need all this capacity to get this work done. Do you? Let's have that discussion first. I say this all the time. When you're thinking about scaling, don't try to add complex processes to manage complex problems. The first thing you should do, descale, right? Reduce the complexity. Look for ways of reducing the complexity. And part of that means evaluating whether we really need to do this work or not. You should be doing that all the time anyway, right? Decide what you shouldn't be working on. But in many cases, let's face the facts, we do actually need more capacity, right? It's not just something a single team can do. You've got some realistic deadlines. You've got some realistic needs. You might miss market opportunities if you don't do things by certain times. That's all valid, right? That's perfectly reasonable. So that's where we start having the conversation of, okay, yeah, we really do need more capacity because this is important stuff. So let's talk about how we scale this up. Now, we also, as we're talking about scaling, visibility becomes so much more important. Transparency, this is what we really, really need. We've got more complexity in our environment, more complexity to deal with. Transparency and visibility becomes significantly more important, right? You got a single team, well, you can go in and ask them, right? You got 20 teams, that's a lot harder, right? So you got to get information from these teams. It has to be visible. We want to see the big picture. And also, we might need to scale because we do actually have legitimate complexity. Now, let me just talk about this one for just a moment. There are cases where we feel we have to deal with complexity. There are also cases where we can reduce the complexity, so we don't need complex processes, right? But sometimes reducing complexity takes time. Let me give you a really good IT example of this, or technology example. There's a concept that's called microservices. And we don't have to really understand the technology behind it. That's not the important part. The basic idea with microservices is that we're building tiny capabilities within the product. And these microservices are very easily replaced, right? Or if they blow up, it doesn't have much impact to the other things around it. So you're limiting the impact if something goes wrong, and you're making it easier to replace these little microservices. Now, what that does for us is it reduces the complexity of the architecture. So it makes it easier to manage this. Well, then maybe you don't need all of that scaling. because you could have a team that's just working on one microservice or one area of the product, and they have very little impact to any other teams in the organization. So what scaling and complexity do you really need when you've changed the architecture to make it so it's not necessary anymore, right? So that's when we're talking about managing our complexity and reducing complexity. Look for ways in our environment we can reduce that complexity, right? It's not just the people in the process. But the thing is, that's hard. Imagine you're working at a very, very large bank. Say we're going to go microservices or we're going all cloud. Well, that could be 10 years, right? So it's not going to happen overnight, right? All right, let's continue on. All right, so here we've got a question.
I'll beam this. Yeah, I'll beam this one, and I will launch the poll real quick. And this is for our friends to kind of play with to make sure that they're getting the gist of what we're saying. So the summary of a business case for scaling Scrum is it many products and many teams? Is it one product and many teams? Is it one team and many products? Is it one product and one team? What do you think based on what we just covered? The business scale for scaling. It's a nice check on what we just said. It's taking you back to PMP class or ACP class, one of those. All right, let's go ahead and end the poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right, and let's share the results. So it's dead heat, and it's not easy when you haven't thought about it enough. A lot of times we think it would be many products and many teams, but that's not a problem, is it, Roy? Because that happens all the time, even in the world of predictive.
Yeah, exactly. And that question doesn't say that you have many teams on each of those products, right? You could potentially have one team on a single product. That's not a scaling issue, right?
Yeah.
We often don't have huge interactions across products, depending on how you define a product, of course.
Absolutely. So in our little business case there that we showed, we had one product and many teams being our concern because of the coordination. One team and many products is painful, but at least you got the one team talking to each other, right? One product, one team is business as usual. But B is where we have a lot of those coordination issues.
Yep.
So,
yep. You got it. Exactly.
That's it. Stuff. All right, Roy, let's jump back into the deck.
Okay, another thing to think about when you're talking about scaling, when you have this complexity to deal with, is are you actually ready to scale? Right? Oops, do I need to share my screen again?
Oh,
sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so the question we should be asking ourselves is, are we actually ready to scale? Right? Scaling is not something for the faint of heart. It takes time. People may not be ready for it. So some things to consider. Are your teams performing, right? Are they predictable? Are they producing quality? Are they able? Do they feel comfortable with their processes that they're accomplishing or that they're using? Think about the product owner. So do they understand the vision? Are they empowered to say no? Do they even know how to prioritize? Right? Sometimes they don't. They don't understand their jobs yet. Do they have the time to do the job? So what we're talking about here is little indications of dysfunction. The bottom one is a big one.
Welcome, my friends. Today we're going into user story mapping. It's something you've heard a lot about. And today we have our awesome guru, Roy, who is responsible for me getting wild and hungry about Agile. You got to blame this guy over here. He's the reason why I'm wild about Agile. So Roy, why is user story mapping so important? And just take it away and roll us through this whole thing.
Absolutely. And if you wouldn't mind enabling sharing, Phil, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So user story mapping is a really good facilitation technique for building backlogs and for imagining your backlog, visualizing your backlog. And so let me do this. So let me share my screen, and we're going to go through a couple of some sample visuals. So today we're going to be using a tool. There are lots of tools out there in the marketplace to help us with this, but I want to give you the opportunity to do some interaction. This tool is called Miro. Not trying to sell it. Lots of tools out there that do the same basic thing. So I'm going to start over here. What is a user story map and why would we do it? All right. So a user story map is a multi-dimensional view of your backlog. If you think about the backlog, the product backlog, as we've described many, many, many times, It is a sequential list of work that we want to get done. Now, it should be prioritized by value, but the reality is it's actually a sequence of things that we're going to implement. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, there's value in doing that, of course, but you think about all of the work that we do to visualize what it is we're trying to accomplish. We talk about, the vision statements. We talk about, outcomes and all these really good things to help us imagine what it is that we're doing and to empathize and feel what we're doing. And then we take all this stuff and shove it into this flat backlog. Your user story map gives you multiple dimensions, so you can kind of see it in a different perspective. And in this case, it's about the user. Again, going back to principle number 1 in the manifesto, our highest priority is to satisfy the user. So this tells the story of our backlog, right? Our backlog, our products. So something you could consider is the product backlog is kind of like the product goal, what it is that we're trying to achieve from a product perspective, right? It's the outcome that we're trying to get to. And there's, of course, requirements and user stories, all these kinds of things. And I hate using the word requirements, but it's familiar, right? There are things that we need to do in order to achieve that goal. So this helps us visualize that goal from a user's perspective in multiple dimensions. We'll talk about that. I'll start showing it to you in just a moment. So it also gives you some other value too. It helps you identify where you may have missing stories. You might have gone through a lot of time building this flat backlog, but when you see it in multiple dimensions, you might say, oh, we missed something here. Or maybe we've got stories in an area that actually aren't that valuable, right? Because maybe that's not frequently used, or maybe the user doesn't even really care about it that much. You may think it, but once we start seeing the bigger visual, it helps us understand it. Now, again, flat backlogs are really good for sequencing, priority 1, 2, 3. So it is literally a sequence of work that we're going to do, but it doesn't really show you the big picture. Now, just a little bit of background, user story mapping came from Jeff Patton. Jeff Patton's a fairly famous coach in the Agile community. Most people in the community know who he is. He's done some amazing work, really, really good stuff. I always love reading his work. So Jeff has a great quote. He says, after all that work of visualizing the backlog and the vision and all this really good stuff that we do to see what it is that we're trying to accomplish, we feel like we pull all the leaves off of the tree. So we're building this big visual of a tree, pull all the leaves off the tree, load them into a leaf bag, and then cut down the tree. Right. So we're losing the visual. We're losing the original representation, the empathy, the feeling, the picture of what it is that we're trying to do. So it's kind of just a straightforward sequence. Right. So let's talk about how to do it. So just a little more about Jeff. And Jeff says this himself. Jeff didn't invent story mapping. It was a pattern that he and his teams were using. Multiple people were using it. And he kind of recognized this as a pattern. So to his credit, he recognized this pattern, did some good white papers on it, some really good work on it, wrote a book about it. It's called User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton. Great book. I highly recommend it. It's got some good stuff in there, some great tips. All right. Now, just want to recall back to the manifesto, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. Everything that we do about this, everything we do about work is about our users, right? That doesn't necessarily mean our customer is always right. Some people get that confused that, well, the customer is always right, so we do whatever they say. No, we don't, actually. We want to negotiate. That's in the manifesto as well, right? We talk with them, we collaborate with them to help them understand what they really need. So it's not just do everything they want. That's not what we're encouraging. In fact, often we ask them why. Often we disagree with them to help them get better solutions. Satisfying your customer does not necessarily mean giving them everything that they asked for, right? Sometimes it means saying, no, trust us, we're your partner. We're going to help you get better at this, right? All right. So the story maps help us connect with our users. So the people doing the work can be connected to more closely to the people that are requesting the work. It helps you understand your users. So think about this. If you don't know who your users are, how are you going to ever satisfy your customers? And creating a backlog to represent their needs is really going to be very difficult, right? So what we like to do is define the users first, define personas where necessary, define the users first, and make sure that we understand who they are before we build the work, right? That way we have a better chance of actually getting an idea of who our folks are. All right, so let's talk about when we should use story mapping. So I like to use it when we need to create a lot of stories fast. Wow, this is fast, right? It's really quick. We're moving things around and moving them up and down and laughing. You'll never have as much fun writing requirements as doing this because you're collaborating, right? It's entertaining. You're working with each other. It's a great collaboration, right? I also like to use it to get a better understanding of how the system will be used. And that's a critical aspect. It's not just understanding what the system is or whatever the product is. It's understanding how it's going to be used by the users. So we literally define scenarios and we go through step by step by step to experience the customer or user journey through the process. And then we build user stories to represent that journey, right? So every step in the process will have one or more user stories to represent how we implement that step, right? So we feel how the users are going to use it, and they're essentially scenarios of use of the system. You could call them use cases in a way, right? So it helps you prioritize. So that's another dimension, is you get to prioritize the work and visualize the MVP. And just a reminder of what the MVP is, slightly misused, so don't kill me on this one, but the MVP basically is the minimum viable product, the smallest amount of functionality that we can get away with, right? You might call it MMF or MMP. There's a bunch of different acronyms. Most people just call it an MVP just because MVP sounds cool. All right, that's what it is. All right, now when you're building a new system, user story maps are really useful because you get to see the whole picture, right? You get to see how the system is going to be used by the users, but you can also use it if you're enhancing the system. I like to build user story maps and keep them as an artifact, a living artifact. So when we go to enhance the system, we can go back to our story map and see how this new enhancement is going to impact the work that we've already done and the flow of the work, or the series of things that are going to be executed by the user. Now you can also walk the map, right? So once you've got this map defined, you got all your user stories in place, you can walk the map step by step to make sure that we have everything necessary covered by one or more user stories. So you're kind of testing it before you implement it, before you write a line of code, or before you put the first screw into the machine, whatever it happens to be. You're walking through it step by step to make sure that you have the requirements, the things that are necessary covered, right? And again, identify missing stories or perhaps even lack of understanding, right? All right, now here's I like this visual. On the left-hand side is what we typically see, right? So this is our flat backlog. It's a series of user stories or tasks or whatever in sequence, and we break it out by sprints and or releases or whatever. It's a very flat backlog. We don't get to see the whole picture. Useful, but maybe missing something, right? Now, a story map is multidimensional. So we've got the steps across the top, so we see how the users are using the system, and we have the user stories underneath of it. Plus, we can divide the work up by potential releases or MVPs, right? So you can see it gives you multiple dimensions, and there are other things that we add to it as well. But it's a really good visual to help you see a bigger picture of how the system is actually going to be built. All right, so here's the process that we go through. So the first thing is you create a short product or feature brief to frame and constrain the map. So basically what we say is, what's the problem? What are we trying to solve? Who is it for? And why do we need it? So basically a vision, right? Who is it for? Why and what? Excuse me. I don't know why, but every time I'm on camera, I usually have to sneeze. All right, then you map the entire picture, right? So you go wide, and then we define the backbone. This is especially necessary when you're building a brand new product. Define the backbone of the product, or the walking skeleton of the product. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. And then you explore. Now, this is the fun part, right? The fun part is where you're exploring, you're filling in the body, fleshing out that skeleton. You're filling in the body of the map. And this is where you're just throwing out ideas. You don't worry about, is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? We are brainstorming, being creative, throwing out crazy things out there as necessary. We just add a whole bunch of stuff in there, and then we're going to refine it and get rid of it if it's unnecessary or if it's just not the right idea, right? So have fun with it, blue sky, all kinds of fun stuff. All right, then we slice it into releases. We move the stories up or down, depending on, do we need to do it now? Do we need to do it later? And we have discussions around that. So as we're writing these very, very high level user stories, we're also prioritizing them and determining when we're going to release them. And then again, you can define a strategy. So you can define the skeleton, the first release, the second release, the major chunks of functionality. And then over time, which you don't do in the story mapping session, you can refine the work and improve it along the way. Okay. All right, we're getting into it now. So here is the basic framework. So across the top of a story map, we have the narrative. These are a collection of activities that the user is going to perform. So think about using a coffee machine, right? Coffee is very, very near and dear to my heart. I don't sleep a lot because I'm teaching all the time. So I live off of coffee. So it's a very important thing for me. So when you walk up to your coffee machine, you think about the first thing you do. The first thing you're going to do is turn it on. The second thing you might do is select your coffee. The next thing you might do is to open it up to put the coffee in, right? You can tell, I'm really into coffee. You put the coffee in and then you press the button to pour the coffee. Make sure the water is filled. Whoops, forgot that. Got to go back and fill up the water, right? Put your cup in. Better do that before you push the button to start it. So you see how we're sequencing these things. We're going through step by step how the user is going to use the product. I haven't talked about functionality really. I haven't talked about the user stories. I'm simply saying this is what I would go through, my scenario, my behavior as I'm using the product, right? So we want to visualize how the user will use the product, and you put those steps across the top. Now, if you have a very complex system, very large system, then obviously the store maps, it's not going to be able to handle every single workflow in your system. So we'll do multiple maps, for different areas of the product or different areas of workflow. And that's another thing you can do is it doesn't just have to be the user using the product. It also could be a process flow, something that happens in the background that you may not see very much, but the system has to implement, right? In an IT world anyway, right? So it can be whatever series of things you can think through, either a user or the system or flow of products flowing through from vendor to inventory to customer, whatever it happens to be, you're going through step by step and visualizing it that way, right? Don't think about how you're going to do it. You think about what's necessary, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. Now that you have those steps, and you might have multiple maps defined for the various areas of the product. Now you start thinking about how are you going to do it, right? And this is where you start thinking about the user stories. So see where it says tasks. These are technically user stories, right? This is something that you want to do, right? Something that you need to do to implement that first step. So when you walk up to the coffee maker and you push that button to turn it on, think about the user stories that you're going to have to implement to do that. It enables the heating element. It verifies that there's water. Blink the light if there is no water, right? Get prepared for when the user is going to push the button to get the coffee, right? So the individual things that need to be implemented to enable turning on the machine, right? You get the idea. Now, the other thing you're doing is as you're coming up with these user stories related to the steps that a user is going through, you're also moving them up or down depending on a couple of different factors. So it could be frequency of use, right? So if something is used very frequently, think of a product that you use, or think about, an email application, right? What's the functionality that you use the most? And those are the things that you will likely want to do soon, right? The things at the top, that's the most important stuff because they're frequently used, right? This is a way, when you think about it, we're prioritizing work based on the usability or based on the use of the system, right? From a user's perspective. You could also do it by value, right? So if something is going to give you some return, something that's really important, or generate some market buzz, whatever it happens to be, you can also do it by value. So you move these stories up or down. This is where you're getting the sequencing, right? You're doing it up, moving it up or down based on the value or the frequency of use. Now, you also, while you're doing this, you're thinking about, well, do I need this now? Can I implement this without that, right? Now,
Hello, fellow professionals. I'm here with my awesome co-trainer, Buddy Roy, who is also my coach in the world of Agile. And we're excited because we have a treat for you this coming week. We're having the Agile 360 seminar. It's a seminar like no other. It's a simulation of Agile practices, Agile thinking, Agile thought, and it's agnostic. And you're going to be learning a whole lot. But before I get into all the surprises, let's have some very brief introductions. Roy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Roy Schilling. I'm an Agile coach. And basically what it means is I help organizations learn how to do Agile and other things as well. It's not just about Agile. It's lean, a bunch of other organizational design, a bunch of other things as well. A little bit about my background. I've been practicing Agile and lean concepts for about 22 years and coaching organizations for around 15. Has started out as a software developer way back, longer than I care to remember. And I've since then, been doing coaching and working with a lot of organizations to help them get better.
Awesome. Thank you, Roy. And my name is Phil, and I've been in the world of project management for over 20 years, worked as a program manager as well, got into the world of Agile about 13 years ago, and was fortunate to meet Roy midway in my journey around 10 years ago. And Roy has helped elevate my consciousness and mindset regarding what agility really is. Coming from a very heavy process background, I had to lose a lot of my poor thinking, my predictive thinking, and I attribute a lot of my agility and my agile ways, my agile lifestyle to Roy's awesome training. Roy has also worked with me on this book, which is for the PMP exam, which I know a lot of you don't care to know about, but perhaps you care to know more about this one, this Agile Principle one, raw and uncut, and it's from a more agile perspective, and a lot of the thoughts that we're going to be sharing with you are in that book, and we're going to be presenting to you information that you can take away. But what excites me, Roy, about this session that you're going to be doing for us is that you're going to be doing various simulations, starting with Kanban. Can you give us some insights into why Kanban? Because people are like, I thought it was Scrum. Why Kanban, and how is that going to play out?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And first, let me say, I love these kinds of sessions because they're much more interactive. You're experiencing and not just hearing the two of us talk. Right. It's you can get a lot out of that too, but still, so much better when you're actually experiencing the whole process. So let's talk a little bit about the reason for Kanban. Any organization, any process, any project can benefit from core Kanban concepts. It's more about things like eliminating waste. Don't you want to get rid of the waste in your projects? Why do your projects take so long? Because there's a lot of waste, pure and simple. Other things like the flow of work. We tend to think, when you're bottlenecked, when you've got some problems, you don't have enough capacity, obviously, right? So you go hire more people. What happens to your costs and your schedule? Your costs go up and your schedules don't necessarily get solved. I'm sorry, your costs, your schedule doesn't get solved simply because, adding more people adds more complexity, more communication, a lot more difficult. So Kanban introduces some concepts like work and process limits. It introduces concepts like flow and queuing and buffer states, wait states, things like that help you monitor the flow of the work to get the efficiency that you need to get more work done with the same number of people, right? And that's why Kanban is so critical. I don't care what framework you're using, waterfall, go ahead, use it. Doesn't make any difference. Kanban can help make your work a lot more efficient. Right, Phil?
Absolutely. And from my little observations in the sessions I've been doing, people gravitate like that towards Kanban. It's like clockwork. It's like plug and play. It's like where you've been all my life, and they just take it and they run with it. And now on the flip side, let's be transparent. Let's be honest. We know that the most widely used framework in the world of Agile today, there's a lot of marketing, a lot of good publicity, and I don't begrudge it. We love it as well. It's Scrum. But Scrum has its limitations. I know that Scrum purists won't like me saying it. It has its limitations, though. And therefore, in this Agile simulation, what we've done is taken the best of both worlds. We've some Kanban in there, we have some Scrum in there, and we also have some other practices in Agile that I haven't even talked about in Scrum, like product ideation, road mapping, story mapping, something people don't even know those things exist. We're going to go through 21 iterative steps to illustrate to those who have said, I've never been on an Agile project. I've never seen Agile in depth. How does it all work? We're going to be showing you how it works from the product idea, and you're going to be playing different roles. You're going to be going through the process. You're going to be going through creativity processes. You're going to be encountering problems that you have to solve. And by the time we're done, through Roy's tutelage, going through the process, you're going to come away with a very firm understanding of who should lead each step along the way. I always get the question, Mike Cohn jokes about this. Where did the product backlog come from? It came from Little Green Man, aliens, and they dropped it. Well, we're going to find out where the backlog came from. We're going to talk about how user stories get written, some of the rules of the game to follow, Who leads the different steps? Where does the team come in? What about testing? What about documentation? What about deployment? What is the difference between release and deployment? All that stuff you are going to learn. It's going to be crystal clear. And as Roy said, you are going to have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. And Roy is very good at answering questions because he's been there just like you. Roy, do you remember your very first Agile project? What did that look like?
My very first Agile project? Is that what you're asking? Oh, wow. Phil, this is really kind of funny. My very first Agile project, I was a freshly minted Scrum Master. Just went away for my 2-day training session, came out excited. It's like, I know this. I know how to do Scrum. I can do this. And then I started my first project and it was an absolute failure. It was awful. We did everything wrong. But you know what we did? We followed the guide. We followed it. We did all the steps and our project still failed.
Wow.
Well, we didn't understand anything. That was the problem. And that's kind of the point is you got to experience, just getting some training and just reading the books that helps you. You got to experience, you got to practice to help reduce some of those failures.
Absolutely. You got to practice. And, I get a lot of questions from people on their day one and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start from. And if that's you, if you've been for all these certifications, whatever they may be, PSM, CSM, I don't care, whatever they are, but you're clueless about the inner workings on a day-to-day basis on your day one, you need to be in this program. And the way to do it, you need to go on down to 360.pmradio.org. That's 360.pmradio.org. We're excited and looking forward to you joining this seminar. Lots of you have been on our PM360 or DigSIP seminar, and we're looking forward to seeing you again, aren't we, Roy? Okay, well, thank you very much again. Look for the links below. It's 360.pmradio.org. We'll see you, and the date, it's July 13th. It's on a Saturday, and it's at 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. So,
Okay.
Cool. And a lot of that was the old exam, isn't it there? But if you're using the world of agile behaviors and thinking to get to a destination in the world of agile, it's going to be something like this. You're going to be sometimes way off course, and then you're going to be, oh, way off course. Let's redirect. And sometimes you're going to be so far off course, but eventually, with trial and error, you are eventually going to get to your destination. But if you already know A and the requirements in great detail, and B and the technicalities in great detail, then there's no need for you to use Agile. But if you don't know, then it makes sense to use Agile. Agile has a lot of experimentation, a lot of discovery along the way. It's not a straight line, all right? So you just need to remember, predictive will look something like this, and Agile will look something like this. Now, it's not easy to pull Agile off. To pull Agile off, you need a number of things. And by the way, when I'm going through this with you, I will be sharing different images once in a while. So like the images I create in the whiteboard, I will just send them to you in the chat and you can just create a folder for them. But going back to where we were, you need certain things to make Agile work. First of all, your company or the team, whoever you're working with, they have to buy into what you're doing. If they don't buy in, then just forget it. Secondly, you need to have T-shaped skills. T-shaped skills, does anyone remember what that means? What does the term T-shaped skills mean?
Those are the like the people that are the most technical, or those that has the, I guess, skill.
They have broad range of capabilities that can be used.
Good. So in two veins, we could be talking about the technical people. Yeah, that's true. We're not talking about the project managers here, because in the Agile world, we don't usually focus on that. So Kareem is saying we focus on technicalities, and Caris is saying that it's the broad skills in those technical people And what's the other component, Clarice? The broad scales is the bar at the top.
I
And
guess
what,
the other one, they have a certain specialty or expertise.
there you go, the specialisms. Yeah, very good. So you do recall from our discussions. So when we say T-shaped skills, yeah, we're not talking about the project management type skills per se, like scheduling and costing. We're not really talking about that. Like Kareem is pointing to the technicalities, the ability to do the technical work. That's what the team does. But again, putting some more context, we're talking about the broad. There we go. Fabricio said versatility. You summed it up nicely. That's a very concise word. Yeah, some team that's versatile. So T-shape means broad. You got to remember the specificity of PMI's language, broad, and then deep. Deep specialism, deep. In other words, you are a specialist and you know your stuff, broad and deep. Does anyone remember any of the other terminology for T-shaped skills?
The eye shape.
Thank you. So I-shaped is, so if we're I-shaped, we're a one-trick pony. So you don't want to be the one-trick pony. The one-trick pony is just one area. So you want to beware of the one-trick pony kind of team member who can only do coding. Can you do some testing, Phil? No, I'm just a coder. No. So we want deep, broad. I-shaped is not what we want. So that's what we don't want. What's the other one that we call this thing? T-shaped, and what are the other two that we could call them? Does anyone remember? I'm trying to channel you immersion person. Those of you that were in the immersion. Let me give you a clue. Who remembers this? Who knows Questlove? What does he have in his head at all times?
Oh, what was it?
Say it again, Kareem.
I'm trying to figure out the name of it.
You got it. I just heard you say it. Say it.
A pick.
Port.
What does he have in his hair at all times?
A pick.
It's not a pick. It's got the black power hand and he's always in his hair at all times. It looks like a pick, but it's a comb. Am I ringing a bell here? Anyone at home? Oh dear. Broken comb, folks. Broken comb. He's always got that comb in his hair. Broken comb. Yeah. Broken comb. And what is broken comb is just another word for this, paint drip. So it's called paint drip or broken comb. So whenever you hear T-shaped skills, it just means that person has varying degrees of specialism. So you could have broken comb, different degrees of specialism. It's in the Agile Practice Guide. Don't worry, you'll see it eventually. But this is pretty much what they're saying. They're saying we can't just say people are T-shaped. We could also say that they've got a broken comb profile or a paint drip profile. Does that make sense? Cool.
Such a negative, image for something that's so positive.
Yeah, broken comb, I know. Paint drip, I know. All right. And then the other thing you need for Agile to work is co-location. So we've already established that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the one that is most adaptable to change. So what is Agile based on the little discussions we've had so far? What do you think?
Type of music.
I made it outrageous deliberately. So it's a mindset. Good. Now no one will ever deceive you that it's anything else. Now, I want to make it very clear that Agile is a very, what should I say, far-reaching mindset. Even if I worked at Starbucks, I could be Agile in how I attend to my customers, because Agile is all about how you treat people, how you treat the team, how you behave. So it could be used pretty much anywhere, anywhere at all. Okay. So again, you got to remember, it's not the strongest companies that survive. Think about it. Where's Blockbuster today? Did you ever like rent videos from Blockbuster? They're nowhere today. You remember those good old days? Blockbuster, huh? Also, here in the United States, Fabricio and Carice, you probably have heard about how Blockbuster was crushed by Netflix. Netflix was agile. Blockbuster was not.
Oh,
Yeah. Did you hear about Blockbuster? So Blockbuster tanked because Netflix was saying, please buy us, please. And Blockbuster said, no, we're going to create our own and we're going to be better than you. So take a hike. So poor Netflix, they went looking for money to do some tests on having movies online. And look at it today. They're doing their own movies. They're crushing it. Where's Blockbuster? Nowhere. Netflix saw the trends. They were agile. Blockbuster was not. I can
they
give you an
adapt.
example. Say it again. They adapted, exactly. You got it. And I could give you example upon example. Where's Circuit City? Does anyone remember Circuit City? They used to exist. Where's Radio Shack? Not very prominent. They're still alive, but not very prominent. One of my mentors, distant mentors, he bought Radio Shack, and they're trying to bring it alive again. But if you're not agile, everything collapses. You know where everyone goes for appliances? Where do you go?
Amazon.
Thank you. Amazon. So if you're not competing in that same space, you're in trouble. And speaking of Amazon, look at Toys R Us. What happened to Toys R Us? They went bust. Why? Well, Amazon, they kind of stiff-armed them. If you read the story, Amazon didn't keep their part of a bargain, like you could call it a gentleman's agreement. But at the end of the day, poor Toys R Us, they were not able to break even. Stores started closing. They were not agile. And there are many more like that. There's a store in London called TM Lewin, and they're big on apparel, and they make some real nice fancy shirts and ties. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, they were not able to sustain because they were not agile. They were not doing stuff online. They relied on people going into stores, folded up, right? Oh, well, I should say people bought their assets. So another company bought their assets, and I think they bought their name to keep them alive. But so agile is important. It's a way of thinking. Here's another question. Let's take a look at this one. Based on the things I just said, what do you think? There you go. Awesome. All right. So it's very clear that Agile is not just for IT. Agile can be used anywhere at all. Like I told you, Roy and I started training this stuff together from one of my clients that was into fire safety equipment. So they manufacture the equipment that the firefighters wear to protect them. And they wanted to be agile, and they called us in, and the rest is history. My buddy Roy and I have been doing this now together for 8 years for different companies. So I want Roy to come on for a quick second, and Roy is going to talk to us virtually, of course, about Agile not being just for IT.
All right, let's jump in and let's talk a lot about Agile. So first thing I want you to understand is that Agile is not just for IT. It came from software. Obviously, absolutely, that's the history of Agile. That's where it came from. But if you even look beyond where Agile, the term Agile really got started, and actually a lot of these concepts come from manufacturing. So it's gone through many different iterations, and Agile got a major hold of the software community because the technology had caught up and it was easier to do things in iterations, stuff like that. But now we're using it pretty much everywhere. I do a lot of work. Marketing companies are doing it. If you're building physical products, like Phil and I have worked for organizations that build or work together on some organizations that have built physical products like safety equipment, things like that. I've done work for a company that builds elevators, and pharmaceutical companies, as I mentioned, construction, big in the research and development space. I've heard some people say, well, you can't do Agile and R&D, you've got to do waterfall. No. Actually, we'd prefer the other, because Agile is all about experimentation. It works great in R&D. I would suggest it's probably even better than waterfall in that case. Again, not saying waterfall is bad, simply that I would suggest that in that kind of a space, Agile is built for experimentation and learning. Now, some of the core concepts some concepts that I want you to understand as well is that there are practices, just like there are practices in predictive that are valuable for Agile, there are also some practices in Agile that are really good for your predictive approaches. So you can kind of blend some of these and get some value. I have lots of organizations that are doing waterfall projects, and we teach them some Agile concepts that they bring into their Agile projects, and it improves them. So let's make sure that we understand Agile is not, you don't have to be pure Agile, you don't have to be pure waterfall. You can kind of combine these things. One of the things that we really want you to take to internalize is the concept of process improvement. It's continuous improvement. The actual term is Kaizen, Kaizen. What this is a philosophy of always looking to get better, always trying to find a way of improving your process, improving yourself, improving your team and your relationships with your team members, improving your organization. So it's always looking to improve. So we could potentially take that and make use of that in our waterfall projects as well. Another concept that you want to get is the concept of eliminating waste. Often, not always, but often in traditional environments, you're really not focused on improving, you're focused on delivering. You're not focused on eliminating the waste that you have in your process. Again, you're primarily focused on meet that date. Well, if you think about it, if you're able to clean up your processes, eliminate waste, there were things that are just not necessary, but we've been doing them forever just because we've been doing them forever. If you look at those things and find ways of making things leaner, getting rid of the garbage that you don't need anymore, then you are going to be able to deliver more successfully. You're going to be able to meet those project deliveries. So it's not just about delivering, it's also making an investment in the process that enables you to deliver. And again, that's something that you can make use of regardless of what process you're following. It's more of a cultural behavioral thing than anything else.
More culture and behavior than anything else. So, what is the most important on a project? Think about this for a second. Is it A, B, C, or D? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to relaunch that poll. Going to get us out of classroom mode so I can see your lovely faces again. And let's do it. Well done. We learned something. So the purpose of this question was to pretty much force you to choose the most important thing. So we gave you ridiculous options that we knew you wouldn't choose, like B, C, and D, astronomical profits. Sounds suspicious right off the bat, right? Winning even if team members are sick. Yeah, you wouldn't choose that. So we wanted you to choose A. But I'll show you what the real question is. The real question was this. If I had shown the question to you like this, and I had said, choose the 3 most important aspects. Now you know where I'm going. Yeah, I know you're going to choose one of the right ones. Let me stop. I'm sorry. Let me relaunch. All right. Let's see if you're able to crack the code. So you already got one of them right.
Definitely choose that one. But you want to be thinking in that vein to get the others. Because good job, good job, good job. So is it deliver on time, deliver on budget, deliver all plan scope, meet? What are the top three for you? Top three. I should have asked the question again.
Sorry.
Let me do that again. What are the top three? Let's relaunch. Only three. Only three. And you got to remember what Roy just said and what you just chose in the previous question. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. 3, 2, and 1 to end the poll. Share the results. Very, very good observations overall. Here's the deal. In the world of Agile, we are hyper-focused on the team. We're hyper-focused on meeting customer needs and quality. Now, in the world of Agile, we're not saying schedule and budget and scope aren't important, but think about it. If your team is not engaged and your team is not happy, then none of these, I can assure you, none of these is going to conveniently happen. They're probably going to be late. They're probably going to go over budget, right? They're probably not going to deliver what you're seeking anyway. So in the world of Agile, we want to focus more on customer needs and quality. And of course, primarily the team. We're also hyper-focused on the team because if the team is not happy and the team is not operating at its efficiency, maximum efficiency, you might as well kiss 1, 2, and 3 goodbye. Now, if your team is satisfied, they're going to work on meeting quality requirements. They're going to work on meeting customer needs. And 1, 2, and 3 are not unimportant, but they are not most important. From an Agile perspective, we focus more on people, quality. And then if quality has been met, even if you don't deliver on that milestone, the customer is going to be more forgiving. What's the point of delivering garbage on time? Think about that. And what's the point of delivering on budget if at the end of the day, quality hasn't been met? Oh, we're just trying to get into the budget. Well, you didn't. So thank goodness no one chose budget. And then last one here says deliver all planned scope. Well, just think about it. And I'm glad you didn't choose it, because if you deliver all planned scope and then there's no quality, or you deliver all planned scope and then there are things the customer didn't need eventually, then what's the point? So the idea is to focus more. It's not saying schedule is not important. It's not saying budget is not important. It's not saying scope is not important. But in the world of Agile, we're definitely not focused on all of the scope has to be delivered. No. So in the world of Agile, we actually look at scope as being flexible. Any questions about this? Does it make sense that if your team is happy, everything else will kind of follow suit? Yeah? Good, good,
Yes,
good,
sir.
good. Awesome. All right. Now let's talk about another favorite of mine. We're going to hear from our buddy Roy real quick. He's going to tell us, just give us a quick opener to the concept of the Agile Manifesto value. So let's listen.
So the Agile Manifesto was put together back in 2001, and it was called the Snowbird Summit. It was a bunch of folks that got together out in Utah. Pretty sure it was Utah. That's not an exam, so don't worry about that. But they got together and they wanted to kind of consolidate the industry a bit. There were lots of Agile practices going on prior to 2001. Agile's been around for quite a long time, actually. But there were a lot of these practices going on, and they were really not coalescing. So they got together and they talked about how do we bring the community together. So they came up with a manifesto. And the manifesto is really a set of values and principles that help us drive culture and behavior and philosophy rather than about practices. This is not about the practice. You're not going to see anything in here that is really specific to Agile. You can make use of these values and principles in your organization today, even if you're not doing Agile, and you'll likely get better. It's about building good organizations and good behaviors. So there are 4 values and 12 principles. It starts out by saying we're uncovering better ways of developing product by doing it and helping others do it. And through this work, we have come to value. And I want to be clear on these so that you don't go down the Agile myth road. There's a lot of Agile myths out there, and let's make sure that we really understand this so you know what Agile is and what Agile isn't.
Very important to know what Agile is and what it isn't. So in the chat, I shared with you the Agile manifesto.org site. We're now going to go a little bit deeper into these. So I want to share these with you real quick. Let's get back out of classroom mode. So what this is saying is we are uncovering better ways of developing product. When we say we, it's really talking about the 17. So as Roy said, these 17 software developers, they came together in this place called the Snowbird Resort in Utah. And their idea was to propose a new way of developing software. You can see Roy and I, we've decided to change it to read, we are uncovering better ways of developing product. Now, the only reason why we changed it is because in the real world, it's not just about IT. Everyone's using Agile. So through this work, the signers of the manifesto understood how much of an impact these principles would help them in the field of software development. But they had no idea that it was going to take the world by storm. Now there's so many millions and millions of people using this concept, this mindset. So let's talk about the first one, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. But you got to first of all read the last sentence of the first part. Through this work that we've been doing, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. I value a drink of water over Coke Zero. I didn't say Coke Zero was bad. I didn't say don't drink Coke Zero. I just said I value water more. Do you get that mindset shift? Because in the world of Agile, when you tell people about individuals and interactions over processes and tools, they think you're saying, oh, processes and tools are no good. No, 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 no one said that. You get what I'm saying? Okay. I could say, I value coconut water over Red Bull. Did I say Red Bull was bad? No. But I value coconut water because it's natural. So you got to read this carefully. It's saying value the things on the left more than the things on the right, because those are more important. Have you seen a project where they've got all the processes and tools till the cows come home, but the people can't agree? Yeah, they're not getting along. So what good is all the Microsoft projects and all the Primaveras and all the processes? No good. So individuals and interactions, how they interact is more important. The next one says working product over comprehensive documentation. We value having a working product that we can give to our customer over a bunch of documentation and no working product. I often use this example. So I traveled a lot in the earlier part of my teaching career. So people know that I go to the chiropractor every now and again, and I use things like this. This is a back massager, right? So one of my friends decided to get me a back massager for one of these events. I think it was Father's Day or something. And I ended up plugging the thing from Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, into the wall, and it didn't come on. There was a big old manual though, but it didn't come on. What do you think I valued? A working product. I wasn't happy. I returned it because it didn't work. It took another 2 weeks. It came back, plugged it in, and I use it every now and again to give me a good back massage. So it just shows you customers are not going to value your big old documentation if there's no working product. That is not to say that documentation is not important, because what happens when I want to change the configuration and I want to make it hot, right? Or I want to make it cold, I should have a document, a manual that shows me how to do that. So let's demystify it. We're not saying documentation is not important. Let's talk about the next one. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. All we're saying is stop looking at your customer, if you were, as an enemy or as a dollar sign. You know, some people are just like, oh, we got to negotiate. You want a change request? Well, that's going to cost you more money. That's not a good disposition. Why don't you try to find out how can we work together so that we minimize costs? You get what you want, we get what we're looking for, and we don't have to charge you an arm and a leg. It's a different mindset. When you see your customer as a partner, you act differently. You act differently. Like this class, I see you as my partners now, and I always need to say, what will give you the most value for this prep? So we're having the CAPM stuff. Why do you think I invited you? To add value. Because we're now partners. I didn't need to invite everyone to CAPM, but I did because I want us to work as a team. You're happy, I'm happy. You're certified, I'm on cloud 9. That's my mindset. So Agile has taught me a lot of things. I am not saying negotiation is not important. It is, but even more important, right, is the collaboration with the customer. Think about it. You went to your local Starbucks. You've always gotten the number 2 with cream. On this particular day, you went in and you're so sure you ordered a number 2, but when it came out of the window, it looked different. And the person on the window said, yeah, you ordered number 5. What are you looking at? Yeah, that's what you ordered. Why are you making it sound like I got your order wrong? You ordered number 5. Wow. They couldn't even work with you. They couldn't do customer collaboration. They're showing you, oh, this is the contract. That's what you ordered. No, that's a very bad mindset. So even at a Starbucks window, you should be able to say, oh, I'm going to work with the customer instead of showing them what they ordered. Let me just give them what they want. And the last one, it just says, responding to change over following a plan. The great Mike Tyson, he has a quote that says, everyone has got a plan until they're punched in the mouth. What happens when you're punched in the mouth? You're looking at the canvas or looking up at the canvas. Either you're down or you're up, whichever way, just not good. All right. So I want you to really internalize these. I'm going to ask you a few simple questions about the manifesto. Are you ready? All right. Let's go to our question bank. These are very simple questions. If you want to keep the Agile Manifesto page open, that's also okay. Okay, so let's do this. And then I think when we're done, we should be up for a break. Okay. Almost 10 minutes, okay. Let's get the question bank open. Give it a few moments. It's not cooperating. Hang tight. Any questions, by the way, before I begin asking you the questions? I should have asked you that first. Any questions about the questions that I'm about to, or any questions about what we've talked about so far? Does it all make sense? Perfect sense?
Yeah. Yes. Sir.
Okay, good. All right, let me attempt to get this open.
What is the best way to remember the value part of the agile? What is the best way to memorize that?
Good. So honestly, for your exam, it's less about the memorization and more about the internalization. So I would say, look for examples from your own world. Like I told you about the gift from Amazon and the Starbucks window and Mike Tyson's quote. Just remember those pieces, right? But there's a mnemonic, there's a silly little mnemonic I have, and the mnemonic is I want change in requirements, IWCR. I want change in requirements. I, individuals, W, working, C, customer, R. The more you look at them, it's just going to all stick one day. One day you're just going to say, oh, wow, this is sad. I remember everything. I've been looking at it for too long. All right, you ready for some questions? All right, let's go. Here is your first, oops, not so quick, not so quick. Here is your first poll for the values. I'm sorry, not that one, this one. 4 options, choose one. All right. All right. So these are very quick. I want these to be like 15 seconds a pop, 20 seconds. So let's end it. 3, 2, and 1. All right. So the answer to this, my friends, is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Just remember that it's more important to have people interacting at their optimum than to have a bunch of processes and tools and everyone's in disarray. Here's your next one. Agile Manifesto states working product over what? Just remember my story about Amazon and the gift from Amazon. Good. Awesome. It's a home run. Well done, my friends. It's working product over comprehensive documentation. Here's your next one. Customer collaboration over what? Remember the Starbucks window? You ordered a number 5 instead of a number 2, and they refused to work with you. Lovely. Let's end the poll. Brilliant. Brilliant stuff. That is very correct. Lovely. Okay. Yes. So let's go to our next one. Thank you, Carice. I see that. It's a great question. All right. Let's answer this one. The Agile Manifesto states responding to change over. Lovely. You folks have really, really internalized this. This is great. Great stuff. All right. So the answer is following a plan. Going into this one, this is a nice segue. What do you think? Wow, you folks just elevated the game. Home run. I love it. Great job. I cannot tell you how many times that question is not gotten right. And you folks did well. Well done. Well done. We plan continuously in the world of Agile. We're very flexible. If we said it has to be monthly or weekly or one time, then we wouldn't be Agile, would we? All right. So let's see. Oh, very good, Kareem. Good. Get it down. IP address. Ah, good, good, good. All right. So we got a question from Carice. We're going to answer this question before we go on break. It's a really brilliant question. And Carice is asking, I'd like to know why in Agile it says that we explore requirements iteratively and deliver incrementally. It's a great question. So let's take a look at the dimensions in Agile. In Agile, or just project management, I should say in general, we have this axis and this axis. And this axis, we could say, is more like frequency. Let me make it smaller. Let's call this delivery frequency. And this, we could call this frequency of change. So predictive, when we're working predictive, you got to remember predictive does not change a lot. How often do we deliver in predictive? Can someone tell me?
Once.
Once, thank you. So we have predictive over here. How often do we deliver in iterative? If you open the Agile Practice Guide, page 18, you'll see the answer, but I don't. One time, very good. So frequency of delivery for iterative is low. So iterative is here. It's one time. However, the frequency of change for iterative is very copious because in iterative, we're doing things in iterations and we're repeating them until correct. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Now, let's talk about incremental delivery. Incremental is up here because we are delivering very copiously. But the thing about incremental delivery is most times the degree of change is not as high. What we're focused on is getting stuff out quick. And usually the requirements are not that changeable. For example, I'm supplying 5,000 of these to Jeff Bezos, and we're doing it incrementally. So instead of me delivering 5,000, I'm going to do it in batches of 300, 200, 500, 100, however many, but it's going to be in tiny increments. But for a product like this, we pretty much know what we're doing. We're not going to be changing it a whole lot, but we're going to be delivering it a whole lot in tiny batches. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my problem is more with hybrid. I'm trying to understand where that fits in, because I'm assuming you're going to be using incremental, some iterative, and I guess some predictive, but in my mind, can't figure out.
Good. I got you, Corey. So the last piece is Agile. And what is Agile? Agile is the best of both worlds because it is both incremental and iterative in that we're delivering in smaller pieces and we are revising things, doing things over and over and over and over and over again until the customer is happy, we're happy, until they're correct. So Agile is both incremental and iterative. Now, if that makes sense, we'll move on to talk about the hybrid. Does this make sense? How Agile, good. Now let's talk about what hybrid is. Hybrid is on a continuum of anywhere along this axis. You could be partly predictive on a project in one phase, and in another phase, you could choose to be more agile. It's one project, but they're different parts of the project. You're just changing how you do the planning and the delivery depending on the segment of the project. So let's say we're working on a project and we're doing a IT kind of programming type project where we're programming a lot of code. We could do that using Agile. And now we're done programming all the code. We know that it works and it's done. We could choose to deliver according to certain milestones. according to a certain cadence. So Agile is very flexible in you creating whatever you're creating, but when you create it, you could choose to deliver in a predictive manner where everything is planned out. Now, when we talk about hybrid, a lot of times people think that hybrid means there's some special hybrid formula. No, there's no hybrid formula. That's why it's hybrid. You, the PMP, you got to decide, how do I want to combine these? And that's why you're in this course, because by the time you're done, I'm going to teach you all the different Agile practices. When you know the Agile practices and you know the predictive practices, you know how best to combine them on a project. For example, I'll just give you a very simple one. Do you know the very act of taking a daily scrum and combining it in a predictive project with a phase by phase final meeting, if you will? Do you know that that's hybrid? So if you combine a phased gate approach, like where you're meeting at the end of every phase, do you know that phase gate plus daily meeting, that's hybrid? Because in Agile, we don't do phases. But if you're on a project where there's phase gates and you need approval before you can proceed to the next phase, and then daily you're meeting with the team to do daily stand-ups, that's hybrid. Hybrid is just combining the best of the predictive world and the best of the Agile world as you see fit. You do not have to follow any particular rules. You make the rules. That's what PMI is looking for you to do, for it to be called hybrid. You see? Now, we can take it up a notch. Let me show you PMI's definition of hybrid, and then I'll shut up and we can take our break, because I can just go on and on and on for the next 1 hour on this stuff. But let me show you PMI's hybrid models, okay? PMI has 4 hybrid models. And the 4 hybrid models, again, they pretty much follow. Now, I'm showing you slides that are not in our regular deck. But to illustrate the hybrid model, hybrid means you're not anywhere in any one particular quadrant for the entire project. You're, as it were, in different places. Here are the models. 1, like I said, an agile development followed by a predictive rollout. This is on page 27. If you work like this, you are working in hybrid model. 1 project, agile development for the first part, and then a predictive rollout, like I said in the beginning. If you choose to work in this second arrangement, you're also hybrid. Agile combined with predictive. Maybe you have a team developing in an agile fashion, and then you slap a predictive component right on top of it. Maybe it's phase meetings, maybe it's strict milestones. Then you're no longer agile, you're hybrid. Does that make sense, Carice, what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. And then let's say another model is where everything has been done very heavily agile, but you're injecting a very predictive way of managing the risks. And you say, we need to have a risk register, we need to have a big old risk meeting. Okay, now you're moving into a little bit of predictive for just that risk component. Everything else is being done agile, but that little piece. PMI says a largely agile approach with a predictive component. And last but not least, you could flip it. You could do very predictive stuff, like I said, doing stuff in phases, having a big old plan, but then you introduce some agile sprinklings, like a daily scrum, like a retrospective. This is what hybrid is all about. There's no special formula for hybrid. You make the hybrid flavor as you go. And I'll just say this, just for giggles. Roy and I are working on a hybrid model that is flexible and adaptable and will eventually have a certification on. But for now, there's really no existing hybrid model that people say, oh, this is hybrid, this is what we need to do. We could, but it's really more about tailoring. And I think I saw a chat from Fabricio. He said tailoring times hybrid. That's very correct. Hybrid is all about tailoring. Yeah.
I was about to ask this.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So it makes sense. Does it?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I see that chat was actually from Carice. I thought it was from Kareem. Good. Thank you, Carice, for sharing that trick. Okay. Does that help answer the question, Carice?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I just was having difficulty because Agile had two things going on.
Yeah, two things, exactly.
But now I understand.
Exactly. So what we mean is when we say we're doing things in iterations, we're doing them in repeatable cycles with a cadence. So if the cadence is 2 weeks, every 2 weeks we have an iteration where we deliver in increments, but we're planning upfront in these iterations. So we're planning to do things every 2 weeks. The repetitive cadence is really what makes it iterations. The cadence is the iterations. The delivery is the increments. You put them together, boom, that's Agile for you. So in Agile, you cannot say, I'm going to plan everything up front. No, that's not Agile then, because Agile is planning in iterations, doing the work in iterations and delivering the work incrementally. Because you do know that iterative is doing things in iterations, but only delivering one time. So doing things in iterations doesn't mean you're Agile. You could do things in iterations, keep adding and saying, no, I'm not going to release until the very end. Then that's iterative, not Agile. Did I open up another Pandora's box, or did I turn on a light bulb, Carice? Which one?
I'm just trying to remember. I'm thinking like hybrid would be something like, let's say if a company is accustomed to making a dashboard because they've done it before, but then when that might be predictive, but once they get the show and they have to customize it to the business, and then maybe we're moving into Agile because there's more uncertainty about.
Yeah, that's a good way. You got it. You got it. Because you're not being rigid, you're being changeable. And Agile is all about being change driven. In fact, Agile is called change driven. It's a change driven approach. One more thing, because I think it will add some value to you, and then we'll take our break. Thank you for your patience. I want to show you one more image if I'm able to pull it up. I normally include this in my training. Let's see. Let me go to another slide deck, and this will bring it home. So have you ever heard that Agile has flexible scope? Have you ever heard that being said? That Agile is flexible scope? No? In Agile, when we use an Agile approach, it's very important that you remember that scope is flexible. And when you look at Agile, it's also important that you remember that schedule and budget are fixed. So there's actually an image I'm going to show you here. This was meant to be after break, but here it is. So in the world of predictive, we know that we are not just going to add scope. No, scope is fixed. But if you go to management and you say, well, our scope is fixed, but we need more time, they're going to say, okay, how much more time do you need? Or they're going to shout at you, but eventually they have to buckle over and do it. Or you say, I need more money. Usually they'll give you more money. But if you say, oh, I want to add more scope, no, scope is fixed. Except there's a change order and there's a big old dog and pony show, and then it happens. So just remember this. In traditional, which is waterfall, people call it, or predictive, whatever one you want to call it, scope is fixed. Now, in the world of Agile, you flip that triangle on its head, and now scope is flexible. So the example you were referring to about the dashboard and having to customize stuff and people asking for changes, absolutely, that's Agile all day long. So scope is flexible in the world of Agile. However, your schedule is fixed because you're doing things in strict iterations for the most part, right? So there are two types of Agile, but the bottom line is when we're using frameworks such as Scrum, you're doing things to a strict cadence, and that means your schedule is fixed. You're also doing things with a team that doesn't exceed a certain amount. That means your budget is inherently fixed. So in the world of Agile, we say scope is flexible, schedule and budget are fixed. Okay. A lot of stuff. Okay. I'm sorry. I went clear over my 5 minutes, but I thought it would add value. All right, my friends, any other questions before we go, or we'll just do that when we come back? Yeah? Let me go ahead and start the timer.
Thank you.
All right, see you when we come back. Okay, my friends, welcome back. We started talking about the Agile Manifesto before we left. We answered a question, good question about iterations and increment. Now we're moving on to the Agile Manifesto again. So the values are like a base. Then on top of the base, we have the Agile Manifesto principles. So if you haven't already visited the website, I want to encourage you to go to agilemanifesto.org. And when you go to agilemanifesto.org, you'll see the values. And if you scroll down, you'll see there's 12 principles. Let's click on that. And it opens up the principles. And those are the principles, if you ever needed to go through them. The principles are very important for your exam because a lot of times PMI will dress up the language around the principles, give you a scenario, and see if you remember or can identify the principles. So let's go back to our slides where we have extracted these principles. We'll talk about them one by one. So here's the first one. It reads, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable product. Again, we've changed the word from software to product just to get you focused on the fact that this is not about software alone. Agile principles work in any industry, but it says our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. That's the major thing. Secondly, it's through delivering early and continuously. If you deliver early and you deliver continuously, your customer is obviously going to be delighted and they're going to keep being delighted. The next one says, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Why? Because Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Isn't that a good mindset to have? If your customer is asking you for a change late in the day, first of all, you're going to think about the value that says customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Now, when your customer is asking you for these requirements, you are going to understand that this is going to help your customer to compete with an advantage. Why would anyone in their right mind not want to do that for the customer? If money is off the table, why wouldn't anyone want to do that? And that's why, first of all, the value about customer collaboration comes first, so that when you hit the principle, you understand, oh yeah, customer, we're a team. Wouldn't you do that for yourself? You would. That's the mindset. The next one says, deliver working product frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. When you're working in an agile environment, You got to make sure that you deliver frequently so that you can catch any errors as early as possible. Delivering frequently is actually a risk coping mechanism. Delivering in tiny little batches, there's a likelihood that you'll be able to catch anything that's off, versus in predictive, where you deliver at the end and there's a big bang, and what happens? You realize this isn't what we wanted. So in Agile, we have a lot of risk coping mechanisms, and frequent delivery is one of them. Now, I want to make it really clear that we're not talking about iterations here. There's a difference between iterations, getting things in increments, and delivery. Let me give you a very quick example. So this is my favorite flask. One of my students gave me this from her company. But I always like using the example of the different components in this flask. So I want you to think of this. Assuming we're in an Agile iteration. Iteration 1, we get the lid. Here's the lid. We develop this lid in iteration 1. What good is a lid without the flask? So we're not going to deliver this just yet. It's an increment. We could potentially ship it, but we're not going to ship it because no use. So it's not featured enough. Let's leave that by the wayside. The trusty little straw. It's good. It could be shipped, but what good is a straw without a flask? Then we get the flask. What good is a flask without a drink? Then we get the drink. We get the ice, all in different iterations. Iteration 1, the lid. Iteration 2, the straw. Iteration 3, the flask. Iteration 4, the drink. Iteration 5, the ice. Now I can release this drink to my stakeholder. If I don't put the ice in it in Irving, Texas, I'm going to be in trouble because it's boiling hot outside. So I got to deliver the ice. I can't deliver the ice without the drink. So at the end of the day, there's a difference between doing things in iterations and increments versus the delivery. So what they are talking about here is delivery. And they're saying deliver a working product frequently from a couple of weeks. If it's a couple of weeks, that's fine. But don't let it exceed a couple of months. If it does, you could very well be building the wrong thing. So while I'm doing the lid and the flask and the drink, and I need to have in the back of my mind, don't go more than two months, because you want to make sure that this is the right thing. When you start going into months and months and months, there's a likelihood that you may be off. And that's why in Agile, we encourage frequent delivery. Any questions about that concept?
So with your cup example, in an incremental, would we be designing the whole cup and then changing it after?
If you design the whole cup, so the way it would work in the world of Agile is the design of the cup could be an increment, and the additions to it could be further increments. Yeah, further increments. So how you slice and dice the work depends on you. But one thing's for sure, we don't want it to be that we're doing things predictively, because in the world of predictive, we do things in phases, and we say, all right, we're going to do phase 1, it's this, phase 2 is this, and then you don't get any delivery. So it's important that we remember in the world of Agile, we want to have a potentially shippable increment. Like in my first increment, we had a potentially shippable piece of it. If the customer said, yeah, okay, I need this, just give me this for now. I'm going to use this for now and keep doing the rest. And then that's fine. But it's important that the design of this and the delivery of it and everything is pretty much done, then we can deliver it. And if the customer says, yeah, just give me that first piece, I can start using it. Because it could be anything. It could be different pieces of software, different pieces of a software that you're going to keep building on. So iteration 1 could be one piece of it, and then you keep adding to it. All right. questions about this whole delivery versus iteration versus, is it making sense that you could have 5 iterations and it doesn't make sense to deliver because it's not featured enough? It's like someone saying, we've got all the data, that's one increment. Well, there you go, there's a CD. What do I need zeros and ones for? I need a front end to the database. I need the presentation layer. So give me the presentation layer and the data. All right, okay, let's move on. All right, let's move on. I'll go back to the whiteboard or to the screen. All right, so number 4, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. All this is saying is work together with the business people, if you're a developer, just so that you can get to your optimum goal, which is the sprint goal or the iteration goal. Whatever you're trying to do in the iteration, you need to work with the business people. Remember, this is agile, so it's fast, fast, fast. You got to work with them. Now, someone says, Phil, I don't like my stakeholders and we got a bigger problem. But I often tell people we're not talking about the business people as in the business people. This is really a subtle reference to the possibility that you could have a representative of the business, like a product owner or whoever that person is. And even if it's business people, so what? You're in the world of Agile. We got to work together daily. Why? Because things move quick and we want to catch things before they change. So risk coping mechanism. Number 5, build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. It's that question I gave you that said, which of these is most important? It's a team, right? So you want to give the team the environment they need. You want to give them the support and you want to trust them to get the job done. At the end of the day, the team is going to know you trust them and they're going to keep wanting to do great stuff. Number 6, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So I've already talked about Professor Emeritus Albert Mehrabian a lot. He did that experiment and he discovered when there's a heartfelt message, when there's skin in the game, when it's important, it's better to do it face-to-face. And I dare say, even if it's not like mega important, like life or death kind of stuff, face-to-face is the best way. It just is. Look at the class. I can't even imagine not being able to see your faces. It'd just be boring. It would be. Well, someone says, Phil, you're not that bad. Well, yeah, it wouldn't be as good. It wouldn't. So I love having that face-to-face engagement. We're humans. That's how we are. All right. Any questions about these first 6? All right, let's go number. Question? Concern? Okay, let's talk about number 7. Working product is the primary measure of progress. So in the world of Agile, we don't go by % complete. So we don't do that. I know Fabrizio, in the world of construction, we do a lot of % completes because we're always being asked, right, Fabrizio? That's how it works in construction. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, a lot of % completes. So in the world of Agile, we don't do that. The reason why we don't do that is this. If you're doing things in 2-week sprints or even 3 weeks or 4-week sprints or iterations, same thing, we already know that at the end of 4 weeks, you're done. So what is the point of doing % completes? It's only a waste of time and a distraction. Besides, the way it works in a lot of Agile shops these days is as you're working, there's a software application that is keeping record of how many things you're doing, when you started, when you finished. So if anyone really wants to know and a kind of overall idea, they can go into the system and look. But it's not % complete. It'll just show you things like completed versus committed. How many did you commit to? 50. How many are complete right now? This amount. That kind of thing. All right, number 8. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Let's read that carefully. What does a constant pace mean? Can anyone explain that? What do we mean by constant?
Like preventing any impediments or if there's any issues with the software or the product, in a sense.
Good.
Like
What?
it's like keeping it scalable.
Okay. So what else would you use to, let's say I asked you, I'm a team member. How do I maintain a constant pace? Let me ask you another question. In your PMP exam study, how do you maintain a constant pace?
You mean just by like following like the ITTOs in a sense?
So what I'm saying is, let's say you got 35 tasks, like in the beginning. Remember, I told you got 35 tasks, and I was asking you to read one a day. But how do you do that? How do you make sure that you are able to do one a day?
You mean like being disciplined?
There you now we're talking. So being disciplined could be part of it. But what else? Being disciplined in your commitments to other things. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
like the principles.
exactly, pretty much. So you need to be honest with yourself in the world of Agile. And if you have 35 story points to do as a team, you really need to be honest, and you need to say, Phil, I'm sorry, but I cannot do one task a day. I can do one task every 3 days. What is making you say that? You know your capacity. And you know your velocity. These are two different things. What is capacity? It's the ability to take on work, the availability you have to take on work. What is velocity? It's the rate at which you can do work. So if you're making all these commitments to different other things, you're going to find it hard to get the 35 story points done when you should get them done at the end of the sprint. So what I'm saying is that this principle is telling you, watch what you commit to. Because in the world of Agile, we take on things in order to maintain a constant pace. In my example, it's just for the PMP. But in the world of Agile, it is indefinitely. Think about that. How do you maintain a constant pace indefinitely? Like you said, it's discipline. It's discipline in not overcommitting.
I think Carice just nailed it. The whip, Kanban.
And it could also be staying within the whip limit. It could be staying within the whip limit as well. But the bottom line, what they're talking about here is not a fast pace, but one that's not going to kill the team. So if you're in the world of Scrum, you could say it's story points that you're committing to. If it's in the world of Kanban, which is a very different world, so Scrum and Kanban, they're different. They're both Agile, but they're different. In the world of Kanban, it will be your whip limit. And in the world of Scrum, it would be your story points you're committing to. But the bottom line is you don't want to have to do overtime over and over and over again. That's not being Agile. Another thing that we don't do in the world of Agile is just add people randomly. Oh, we got this commitment, let's throw more people. No, we don't do that. The reason is we want to keep our metrics pure and pristine so that when we're using this data to plan for the future, it's not warped. Because if you add more people artificially in order to get one piece done, then it becomes warped. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of look at that when because currently we're updating our fiber line from AT&T to Verizon, and they had to maintain that pace. In order to maintain that pace, we can make sure that there's no outages or any hiccup with the network while that's being updated.
There you go. It's a good example. Great stuff. All right.
Phil.
Uh-huh.
Let me put some thoughts. Let me know if I right or wrong. I see Agile as a organic way of thinking, where people work together and instantly compensating their faults or victories in order to accomplish tasks. So I don't. Is that correct?
Very correct. And I would add working together and compensating the team's faults and victories. So one of the things we don't do in the world of Agile, we try to, so my faults are your faults at the
Okay.
higher level. At the lower level, yeah, Phil goofed. He did this, and now Fabricio had to jump in to save him. But when we're talking about these things in the world of Agile, we just look at it as a team. We're just one team, so the team picks up for itself, right? So the language is very delicate, and which is why I'm really big about compensating for each other.
Okay.
Is a good language to use. If we were really doing Agile in the real world, you would not identify them as my faults, even though you know
All right.
Phil is weak in coding. He's weak. So let him get some pair coaching from someone who is strong. But you're right in the overall idea. And another word that I quite like that you use is organic. That is a very appropriate word to use. It is organic, it's not artificial, it's not forced, it's natural. And you really hit the nail on the head, which is the whole concept of T-shaped scales. The T-shaped scales are to do the very thing you spoke about, which is to help with team equilibrium. If the hand is hurting, I know Cynthia and Carice could probably give us the medical breakdown of it. But what happens when someone's finger is cut? What does the other part of the body do? I can't explain it, but I know something happens. What happens? Can you explain it?
You go into shock.
You go into shock, and the body does, some other parts of the body rush there. What are those things called? I can't remember them. But you know what I mean.
White blood cells.
There you go. I don't know if I'm right, but yeah, absolutely. So the blood cells adjust, but it's still the same body. It's not an external body. It's the body adapting to help itself. And that's what Fabricio is talking about. Yeah. So that's a very good word.
That's why communication it should be very important.
Exactly. If you're not communicating, you don't know who's in pain. Very good analogy. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next one. And this is number 9. And this is continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. So what are we talking about? Not cutting corners, writing good code. If you're a technical writer, writing the best technical document, not cutting corners, paying attention to how things are designed, following good engineering practices. Right? Because there's some engineering practices and code. Well, if you don't follow those, you're going to end up doing things again and again and again. And then you're not going to be agile because that's waste. One of the tenets of Agile is being lean, the bare minimum. We don't want to waste money. We don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste resources. That's what Agile is all about. Okay? Next one. Number 10. This is one of the oxymoron ones that people scratch their head about. Or you read it and tell me if you feel you understand it. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. Does that make sense? Think about it for a few seconds.
I guess if you think about things from a lean perspective, you're going to do what the work that was most valuable, and the things that you don't need to do, you just don't do, but you have a quality output.
You got it. And you want to maximize those things you don't do. So you're always asking, customer wants this. What can I cut out of my steps to produce this and still give them that? Still give them the value, but cutting out what doesn't have to be done. So 10 could be written like this. Maximize the amount of things you don't do while delivering optimum value. A lot of things that we do on projects are actually not needed. A lot of the meetings aren't needed. A lot of the documentation, no one ever looks at it again. So what can we cut out? What can we maximize, right? That will just make you more agile.
Can you repeat that 10 again, number 10 again? How did you mention?
So simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. In other words, if you're going to be agile, you gotta maximize things that are not done. You gotta look for a better mousetrap. You gotta look for a simpler way of doing things. Like Carice was saying, it's really just saying be lean and mean. Be aggressive, merciless in cutting out what is not value in your process. So if you have 12 steps and 2 don't really offer value, why are you leaving them in? Cut them out and then look for more. Try and bump it up from 2 to 5 things that you're not doing, if possible, but your mindset needs to be aggressively cutting out the crud. It could be creating a PowerPoint deck. And in that PowerPoint deck, out of the 100 slides, there are only 20 that you really need. Maximize the amount of work, because now you did all that work and you didn't even need them. So it's a mindset. Again, the principles are just mindsets. Does that make sense? Or is it oxymoron?
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense? Cool. All right. Very good. It's like your PMP prep. There's some things I tell you don't have to do because I'm trying to maximize the amount of things you're not doing. That's really the mindset. All right, number 11. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Why is that? Because when teams self-organize, they own it, and they own it in such a way that it ends up becoming the very best. They've got more skin in the game. They're all in. Number 12. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. This is like the very heart of Agile, because if you're not tuning and adjusting, if you're not looking for ways to improve, are you being Agile? You're not. So this is really talking more about a retrospective. But in the grand scheme, it doesn't have to be called anything. It's just the art of doing what they're advising here. Okay. Any questions?
You say number 12 was more so like based on retrospective?
Yeah, so number 12 is really more similar to the retrospective than anything else, because it says at regular intervals, which is pretty much at the end of each sprint, the team reflects on how to become more effective. How can we get better? What can we cut out? What can we do better in the next sprint, right? And then it tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So you look for 1 or 2, or maybe more items are discovered that you can improve on. Well, those could become backlog items for you to work on for the next sprint. And in the next sprint, you take an account. These things we were working on, did we really get better in our process? Did we improve? Questions like that. So it's more like an unspoken retrospective. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could 12 also
Yes.
be a minor point in the daily scrum?
It could be, exactly. It could be any point. On any point in your timeline, it could be a daily scrum. It could be a sprint review. So tuning and adjusting doesn't have to be at the end of, it doesn't have to be the retrospective, but the reflection really, because a daily scrum is a planning meeting, not necessarily full-blown reflection, but it's an opportunity. And I like what you said, because the spirit of Agile is not to have just one fixed point or one fixed way of doing things. You want to be able to do anything at any time as you see fit. So a lot of times the retrospective would happen at the end of a sprint. But in the Agile community, very recently, we have begun to embrace the idea of a retrospective not having to wait until the end of a sprint. You could have a retrospective at any time the team feels they need to. So instead of waiting till the end of the sprint before you make a correction, if you wanted to make a correction like right now, you could. But it has to, of course, be with reflection. And it's not just a one-person thing, it's a team thing. Now, the thing about the daily Scrum, you have the developers, and we'll take a look at this. You have the Scrum Master and you have the team. The general consensus is that involve the entire team when making impactful decisions. So if everyone is on board, then you're fine. But if it's just a faction of a few people, then get everyone on board and use, I'm going to be showing you how the Agile team uses consensus, because one of the things we do is we vote and we see where we're tending towards. And if majority are saying no, then no, it shall be. Okay, that's the general philosophy. So even though we have some preset ways we do things in Agile, it's not rigid. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Agile. Okay. Good. Can I ask you some
Phil,
questions? Uh-huh.
it is correct to say that Agile is very close to a football team where they have a collective activities. They have deliveries to do, which are the goals. They have the captain. I don't know. Every time I see the content, I look to a team to football or a basketball and identify
Very
some
good.
characteristics.
Very good point. The only thing is that in the world of Agile, we don't have a captain per se, because
Okay.
it's decentralized leadership. So instead of one central figure being a captain, we have a coach that coaches us in how to do good things from an Agile perspective, but that person is not the captain and is not in control. They're coach, and that's a Scrum Master.
Would you consider the product owner the referee?
You could. That's a very good analogy. You could say the product owner is some sort of referee as far as what should be done, not how it should be done, what should be done. So there are three things. One is the product owner that knows what should be done, the team that calls the shots as far as the technicalities of how to apply the technical work, and the Scrum Master that applies the understanding of how to apply Scrum or Agile, if you will, in general. So it's a good analogy, but not one central figure is in control of the team. The team is an organism unto itself, and we rely on decentralized leadership, decentralized. So we don't have one leader. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? Carice, make sense? Good. All right, let's jump into a few questions. And this is about 12 questions on the principles. And as we go through them, you can open up any website, any book, because really the end goal is for you to come away knowing all the crazy run-ins in the morning out of the way, to be able to settle in and learn. Hello, fellow professionals. I'm here with my awesome co-trainer, Buddy Roy, who is also my coach in the world of Agile. And we're excited because we have a treat for you this coming week. We're having the Agile 360 seminar. It's a seminar like no other. It's a simulation of Agile practices, Agile thinking, Agile thought, and it's agnostic. And you're going to be learning a whole lot. But before I get into all the surprises, let's have some very brief introductions.
Roy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Roy Schilling. I'm an Agile coach. And basically what it means is I help organizations learn how to do Agile and other things as well. It's not just about Agile. It's lean, a bunch of other organizational design, a bunch of other things as well. A little bit about my background. I've been practicing Agile and lean concepts for about 22 years and coaching organizations for around 15. Has started out as a software developer way back, longer than I care to remember. And I've since then, been doing coaching and working with a lot of organizations to help them get better.
Awesome. Thank you, Roy. And my name is Phil, and I've been in the world of project management for over 20 years, worked as a program manager as well. Got into the world of Agile about 13 years ago and was fortunate to meet Roy midway in my journey around 10 years ago. And Roy has helped elevate my consciousness and mindset regarding what agility really is. Coming from a very heavy process background, I had to lose a lot of my poor thinking, my predictive thinking, and I attribute a lot of my agility and my Agile ways, my Agile lifestyle to Roy's awesome training. Roy has also worked with me on this book, which is for the PMP exam, which I know a lot of you don't care to know about, but perhaps you care to know more about this one, this Agile Principle one, raw and uncut, and it's from a more Agile perspective, and a lot of the thoughts that we're going to be sharing with you are in that book, and we're going to be presenting to you information that you can take away. But what excites me, Roy, about this session that you're going to be doing for us is that you're going to be doing various simulations, starting with Kanban. Can you give us some insights into why Kanban? Because people are like, I thought it was Scrum. Why Kanban, and how is that going to play out?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And first, let me say, I love these kinds of sessions because they're much more interactive. You're experiencing and not just hearing the two of us talk. Right. It's you can get a lot out of that too, but still, so much better when you're actually experiencing the whole process. So let's talk a little bit about the reason for Kanban. Any organization, any process, any project can benefit from core Kanban concepts. It's more about things like eliminating waste. Don't you want to get rid of the waste in your projects? Why do your projects take so long? Because there's a lot of waste, pure and simple. Other things like the flow of work. We tend to think, when you're bottlenecked, when you've got some problems, you don't have enough capacity, obviously, right? So you go hire more people. What happens to your costs and your schedule? Your costs go up and your schedules don't necessarily get solved. I'm sorry, your costs, your schedule doesn't get solved simply because, adding more people adds more complexity, more communication, a lot more difficult. So Kanban introduces some concepts like work and process limits. It introduces concepts like flow and queuing and buffer states, wait states, things like that help you monitor the flow of the work to get the efficiency that you need to get more work done with the same number of people, right? And that's why Kanban is so critical. I don't care what framework you're using, waterfall, go ahead, use it. Doesn't make any difference. Kanban can help make your work a lot more efficient. Right, Phil?
Absolutely. And from my little observations in the sessions I've been doing, people gravitate like that towards Kanban. It's like clockwork. It's like plug and play. It's like where you've been all my life, and they just take it and they run with it. And now on the flip side, let's be transparent. Let's be honest. We know that the most widely used framework in the world of Agile today, there's a lot of marketing, a lot of good publicity, and I don't begrudge it. We love it as well. It's Scrum. But Scrum has its limitations. I know that Scrum purists won't like me saying it. It has its limitations, though. And therefore, in this Agile simulation, what we've done is taken the best of both worlds. We've some Kanban in there, we have some Scrum in there, and we also have some other practices in Agile that I haven't even talked about in Scrum, like product ideation, road mapping, story mapping, something people don't even know those things exist. We're going to go through 21 iterative steps to illustrate to those who have said, I've never been on an Agile project. I've never seen Agile in depth. How does it all work? We're going to be showing you how it works from the product idea, and you're going to be playing different roles. You're going to be going through the process. You're going to be going through creativity processes. You're going to be encountering problems that you have to solve. And by the time we're done,
through Roy's tutelage, going through the process, you're going to come away with a very firm understanding of who should lead each step along the way. You know, I always get the question, Mike Cohn jokes about this. Where did the product backlog come from? It came from little green men, aliens, and they dropped it. Well, we're going to find out where the backlog came from. We're going to talk about how user stories get written, some of the rules of the game to follow, who leads the different steps, where does the team come in, what about testing, what about documentation, what about deployment, what is the difference between release and deployment. All that stuff you are going to learn. It's going to be crystal clear. And as Roy said, you are going to have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions, and Roy's very good at answering questions because he's been there just like you. Roy, do you remember your very first Agile project? What did that look like?
My very first Agile project? Is that what you asked? Oh, wow. Phil, this is really kind of funny. My very first Agile project, I was a freshly minted Scrum Master. Just went away for my 2-day training session, came out excited. It's like, I know this. I know how to do Scrum. I can do this. And then I started my first project, and it was an absolute failure. It was awful. We did everything wrong. But you know what we did? We followed the guide. We followed it. We did all of the steps, and our project still failed. Wow. Well, we didn't understand anything. That was the problem. And that's kind of the point, is you got to experience, just getting some training and just reading the books. That helps you. You got to experience. You got to practice to help reduce some of those failures.
Absolutely. You got to practice. And, I get a lot of questions from people on their day one, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start from. And if that's you, if you've been for all these certifications, whatever they may be, PSM, CSM, I don't care, whatever they are, but you're clueless about the inner workings on a day-to-day basis on your day one, you need to be in this program. And the way to do it, you need to go on down to 360.pmradio.org. That's 360.pmradio.org. We're excited and looking forward to you joining this seminar. Lots of you have been on our PM360 or DigSIP seminar, and we're looking forward to seeing you again, aren't we, Roy? Okay, well, thank you very much again. Look for the links below. It's 360.pmradio.org. We'll see you, and the date, it's July 13th. It's on a Saturday, and it's at 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. So hopefully you can get all the crazy run-ins in the morning out of the way to be able to settle in and learn some real solid Agile. Whether you're going for the PMP or the CAPM or the ACP or the CSM or PSM or the CSP, I'm exhausted. ESP, or there's so many of them, my goodness. We didn't even talk about the IC Agile people. Whichever one you're going for, just show up. Thank you.